Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. The Castle Nathria miniset announcement should be coming really soon, and I've been thinking, okay, well, how much can we really expect from a miniset? Like, what should we set our expectation level? Obviously, having 3 new cards for each class and a bunch of neutrals can completely change the meta. If you give 3 good cards for each class, then that's going to do a ton. But is that really going to happen, and does that really even need to happen? Because the latest balance changes already fixed the class representation quite a bit. Demon Hunter, Hunter, Shaman all have been improved or are now being more popular than they used to be. The Druid Mage domination has ended. Druid and Mage were like on historically high play levels, especially for a duo at the top of the meta. But there's still of course some things, like Paladin and Warrior, they remain extraordinarily bad. It's rare for classes to be as unpopular as Paladin and Warrior, although not completely unheard of. But typically we do have more like unplayed weak classes than just 2, so in that sense, after the latest balance changes, the meta is a lot more complex than it used to be before the balance changes. So how much can a miniset fix was my original question, but also looking at the meta, is the meta already good? It's kind of good already regarding the class balance perspective compared to historical Hearthstone meta games. But of course miniset can always make it a little bit better. So how about the previous minisets? How much have they changed things? The last miniset we had, Throne of the Tides in Voyage to the Sunken City, it really only has 2 cards that are really strong and deck defining. Clownfish and Herald of Nature. Clownfish just opens up possible new archetypes, and Herald of Nature, like the current aggro druid, just would not exist without Herald of Nature. So those 2 cards are really important. It also has a bunch of mediocre cards that are being used in decks here and there, actually 16 of them, and then 17 of the cards in Throne of the Tides hardly see any play. When Throne of the Tides was released, it gave an immediate bump to Rogue, Warrior, Shaman and Demon Hunter, although Rogue was kind of the most popular deck already before the miniset, and then its added popularity wasn't really the result of the miniset as such, or not the Rogue cards in that, but as the result of the meta changes. But a couple of classes from the bottom were improved by the miniset. The miniset before that, in Fractured in Alterac Valley, we had Onyxia's Lair, and Onyxia's Lair has 5 cards that are really strong, cards like Kazakusan and Raid Boss Onyxia, for example. Kazakusan, you don't really see Kazakusan nowadays, but oh boy was it strong when it was released. Now it's kind of been eclipsed by Sire Denatrius. Also, Onyxia's Lair had a bunch of mediocre useful cards that still play every here and there, 14 of them, and then 16 cards that hardly see any play. When Onyxia's Lair was released, obviously Kazakusan was the big thing and it just jump-started Druid to popularity. Priest also made good use of it, and Rogue, with the additions to Quest Rogue, became more popular when Onyxia's Lair was released, so it really helped 3 classes, of which in particular Priest was at the very bottom, and it got quite a bit better with Onyxia's Lair. The Deadmines miniset for United in Stormwind has been the strongest miniset in recent history. It has like a full dozen very strong cards, cards like Doggy Biscuit for example, cards like Brilliant Macaw, and what's really interesting is that like Brilliant Macaw wasn't even anything when it was released. There was no immediate effect from Brilliant Macaw, but now that it has more synergy cards, it has just become such a stunning performer. It also had 11 mediocre cards and only 12 cards that hardly see any play, so Deadmines clearly very strong miniset. It also still only promoted 3 classes immediately. Warrior, Druid and Rogue benefited from the release of Deadmines. The final miniset that is currently available in standard format is the Veiling Caverns for Forged in the Barrens. It has 3 very strong cards, cards like Mutinous the Devourer and cards like Lady Anacondra. Obviously, later changes to Celestial Alignment have meant that Lady Anacondra is not that played right now, but overall. Also, 13 cards that are seeing some play and 19 cards that see hardly any play, which means that Veiling Caverns has been the weakest miniset released in recent history. When it was released, it was quite influential though, with Shaman, Demon Hunter, Warrior and Druid all gaining in popularity. So looking at the history of minisets have typically been pretty good at making the weakest classes playable, but of course sometimes the meta after the miniset, like Throne of the Tides and all those rogues everywhere, has still not been particularly balanced. So whether minisets actually make the meta more balanced, they tend to not. But they also do tend to change the classes that are at the top and at the bottom a little bit. So coming back to our current situation with Paladin and Warrior being really bad, a typical miniset release would see Paladin and Warrior become mediocre decks. The minisets typically don't change the deck from the very bottom to the very top, so that's quite unlikely, but a typical miniset should see us have some Paladin and Warrior decks be playable within the next weeks, so that's going to be interesting. I really look forward to being able to play some Warrior again. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.